I gave this book 5 stars, but in the beginning, I didn't think I'd give it more than 2, because the beginning of the book made me feel so bad, because there are a lot of problematic shit in this book. One of the first things that made me raise my eyebrows was Cyrus, Blair's mother's boyfriend. Mrs. Waldorf smiled, obviously pleased, and wrapped her arm around Serena's long, slender waist. "Darling, I'd like you to meet my special friend Cyrus Rose," she said. "Cyrus, this is Serena." "Stunning," Cyrus Rose boomed. He kissed Serena on both cheeks and hugged her a little too tightly. She's a good hugger, too, Cyrus added, patting Serena on the hip. Serena giggled, but she didn't flinch. She'd spent a lot of time in Europe in the past 2 years, and she was used to being hugged by harmless, horny European gropers who found her completely irresistible. She was a full-on groper magnet. And wow. Was that allowed to be in there? Apparently yes, but Cyrus was one of my favorite characters from the TV series. He was such a breath of fresh air against the elitism all the other characters seem to have. But now I really hate him, because you know how Blair thought he was uncultured and everything in the TV series? Well, he really is all of those things. And it's also a layer of that sliminess. And yeah, I just don't like him. But there are a lot of characters that I do like more in the books than in the TV series. The most glaring example was Vanessa. Because in the books, Vanessa has a shaved head, she's very feminism, hates elitism. She still has this very potent jealousy towards Dan, and why he's so obsessed with Serena but doesn't notice her. But I have hopes that that will end in the next book, because at the end of this book, there's a guy that's interested in her, and when he sees Serena, he doesn't even notice her because he likes Vanessa so much. And I hope that Vanessa doesn't need to be in Serena's shadows and pine after Dan, because jealousy is not a good look for anyone. And I think that's the main reason why people didn't like Vanessa in the TV series. She was so jealous of the Upper East Siders and how Dan was so obsessed with Serena. And that just created a layer of, she hates the elites, but in a way wants to be a part of them because Dan shows interest in them. And I also like Serena more in the books. She's this charming character who just gets a lot of shit from everyone. She does sleep with Nate while he's Blair's boyfriend, so she's not morally righteous, but she's very likable in this. And she has this way of just being lovable and cool. You really tell that she's the it girl of the series. Now, I thought Blair was violently misogynistic in this book, and I thought, I liked her better in the TV series. And then I remembered, no, Blair was like that in the TV series. She's pretty much the same in the books and the TV series. But one character that seems pretty great in the TV series, but here seems like a total ass, is Nate Archibald. Blair pulled away from Nate. "Look who's here," she said. Nate turned around, gripping Blair's hand when he saw Serena, as if to demonstrate his devotion. Blair squeezed his hand back. "Why don't you go tell her?" she asked him. "Tell her you can't be friends with her anymore." Her stomach rumbled nervously. After all the throwing up she'd done, she really needed another tuna roll. Nate stared at Serena with grim, slightly stoned determination. If Blair thought it was crucial that he tell Serena to get lost, then he'd do it. He couldn't wait to get this all behind them so he could relax. In fact, after he talked to Serena, he was going to head up the stairs and find somewhere private to light up. Vaspoid rule number 1: when things get too intense, smoke a joint. "All right," Nate said, letting go of Blair's hand. "Here I go." "Hey," Serena said. She reached up and kissed Nate on the cheek. He blushed. He hadn't expected her to touch him. "You look marvelous, darling," she said in a silly, haughty-toed accent. "Thanks," Nate said. He tried to put his hands in his pockets, but his tuxedo didn't have any. Stupid thing. "So what have you been up to?" he asked. "Well, I kind of blew off the parties," Serena explained. "I've been out dancing at this crazy place in Brooklyn." Nate raised his eyebrows in surprise. But then again, nothing Serena said should have surprised him anymore. "So do you want to dance?" Serena asked. She put her arms around Nate's neck before he answered and began swinging her hips from side to side. Nate glanced at Blair, who was watching them carefully. Collecting himself. "Look, Serena," he said, taking a step back and removing her arms. "I really can't, be friends. Not like the way we were before," he began. Serena gazed into his eyes, searchingly, trying to read his true thoughts. "What did I do?" she said. "Did I do something?" "Blair is my girlfriend," Nate continued. I have to be loyal to her. I can't really be." He swallowed. Serena crossed her arms over her chest. If only she could hate Nate for being so cruel and so lame. If only he weren't so good looking. And if only she didn't love him. Well, I guess we should stop talking then," she said. "Blair might get mad." She let her arms fall to the side and turned abruptly away. And another thing that I liked here is after she gets back from boarding school, Serena gets isolated from her friends. Blair doesn't engage with her even before she finds out that she and Nate slept together. And Serena spends most of the book alone, trying to relive her old life. But at the end, she gets some advice from her older brother, Eric, that she should just stop trying to be friends with people who don't want to be friends with her. So she calls up Vanessa and gets invited to hang out with Vanessa and looking at Vanessa's sister's band. And Dan shows up. And I really hope Serena can dump Blair and Nate and have real friends. Because Nate and Blair are pretty awful to her. I mean, Blair has a reason after she's found out that Serena slept with her boyfriend. But she was acting like a bitch towards Serena before she found that out. And I just like that Serena has enough self-respect to dump people who doesn't value her. And here comes another favorite from the same page. The music was getting louder and louder around her. People were dancing. Serena could feel Blair watching her. and her hands trembled as she fumbled around in her bag for a light. For a light? As usual, she didn't have one. She shook her head in annoyance and glanced up at Blair. And then, instead of glaring at each other, the two girls smiled. It was a strange smile, and neither girl knew what the other meant by it. Was Blair smiling because she had won the boy in the end and stomped all over Serena's party shoes? Because, as usual, she had gotten her way. Was Serena smiling because she felt uncomfortable and nervous? Or was she smiling because she hadn't stooped to Blair's petty level and spreading nasty rumors and playing with Nate's mind? Or was it a sad smile because their friendship was over? Maybe they were smiling because they both deep down knew that no matter what happened next, no matter what boy they fell in love with, or what clothes they wore, or what their SAT scores were, or which college they got into, they would both be alright. After all, the world they lived in took care of its own. Yeah, I'm really hoping that Blair and Serena will be more enemies than friends who always get back together, even though everyone can see that they're not good together. So please don't spoil me in the comments if that is not the case, or if it is the case. I want to find that out on my own. And even though I saw a lot of problematic shit in this, I don't think the narrative is glorifying it. And one of the best examples of this is with Chuck. Because Chuck possibly drugs Serena and he assaults Jenny. And here, if you get triggered by things like this, then skip a bit forward. Serena rolled her eyes and walked over. "Chuck, is that you?" she said into the crack in the door. "Who do you got in there with you?" A girl gasped. "Shit," Serena heard Chuck say. Chuck had stood Jenny up on the toilet seat lid in the end stall and pulled her dress. You know what? I don't actually have to read this. It's enough that Jenny gets assaulted, Serena sees it in time and stops her. Dan comes in and almost fights Chuck. And instead, Serena comments in her head, "Serena hated it when boys fought. It was so pointless, and it made them look like assholes." "Hey, Chuck," Serena said, poking Chuck in the back. Chuck turned around. "Why don't you go fuck yourself? You know no one else will," she hissed. "You bitch," Chuck hissed back. "You think you can come back here and act all high and mighty after everything you've done? You think you can act like such a princess and tell me to fuck off?" "What have I done, Chuck?" Serena demanded. "What is it that you think I've done?" Chuck licked his lips and laughed quietly. "What have you done?" he asked. "You got kicked out of boarding school because you are a perverted slut who made marks on the wall above the bed in your dorm room for every boy you did. You have STDs. You were addicted to all kinds of drugs and busted out of rehab, and now you're dealing with your own stuff. You're a member of some cult that killed chickens. You have a fucking baby in France." Chuck took a deep breath and licked his lips. Serena was smiling again. "Wow, I've been busy," she said. Chuck frowned. He glanced at Dan, who was standing there, watching silently with his hands in his pockets. "Fuck off, Chuck," Serena whispered. Chuck shrugged and grabbed a bottle of Avian off the counter. "Whatever, bitch," he said, pushing past Dan and out of the door. "You know you love me," Serena yelled after him. Dan knocked on the bathroom stall. "Jenny," he said gently, "are you all right?" More sniffling. Jenny couldn't get control over herself. She could not believe that of all people in the universe, It had to be Serena van der Woodsen who found her like this. Serena must think she was so pathetic. I'm okay, Jenny finally managed to say. She picked up her purse off the floor and pushed open the door. Just take me home. And when I read this, I just wanted to shout at Jenny, no, Serena will not judge you. She knows how Chuck is. And another thing is that Jenny looks up to Serena, not Blair, which I first thought I liked the TV series more because it showed that Jenny isn't a starstruck girl who just looks up at everything Serena is. She is this smart, ambitious girl who wants to be like clever Blair. But now I think, for us who's either read the books or seen the TV series, Blair is toxic. She's a bad person. You can like Blair as a character, but she is a bad person. And Serena, she is morally questionable, but all in all, she is mostly a good person who does bad things. Blair is a bad person who sometimes does good things. And I also gained a new appreciation for Dan. Because while I was watching the series, I'd already gotten spoiled to who Gossip Girl was. So every time I watched Dan, I just had in mind, how mean can he be if he is Gossip Girl and he's doing all these things? That kind of ruined my experience of Dan through the TV series. But in the books, I know that we never find out who Gossip Girl is. And Dan's not Gossip Girl, so I can appreciate him in a way I didn't in the TV series. And also, right before this happened, Jenny had fastly called Dan to come get her, while Dan was partying with Serena. And I was so sure that Dan was going to blow her off and just keep dancing with Serena, and that Jenny would have to either get interrupted by someone else or try to fight her way out of it. But no, Dan was a good brother who stood by his sister and helped her out when he thought she was in need. And I respect him for that. He's the kind of brother I wished I'd had. Dan and Jenny have a really good relationship in the books. And part of that is because they're both obsessed with Serena to an extent. So they're like, oh, Jenny says, oh, I just found this out about Serena, and calls Dan. And he's like, oh, yeah, no, I don't care about that. And he cares so much, and Jenny knows that. But here comes the reason I don't think the narrative is glorifying what they're doing. Questions and answers. Why worry about college? I'm having way too much fun right now, and there are so many questions to be answered. Will S and D fall in love? Will S grow tired of his cordios? No idea what that is. Will J swear off high society and fancy dresses and stick to her friends her own age? Even if they'll never be her bra size. Will V bust out and start wearing all sorts of bright colors? Will she grow her hair out? Will she and that bartender get it on? Will B stay with Nate? Will C stop harassing young girls and admit that he's a loser? Will S really make a movie? She's never even used a disposable Polaroid. Will people stop talking about all of the above? It's unlikely, and I know I won't. It's all so good. Until next time, you know you love me, Gossip Girl. because I think Gossip Girl both criticizes. I think the author took an opportunity to criticize Chuck. Will C stop harassing young girls and admit that he's a loser? Because in the TV series, I really hated Chuck, because in season 1 he was the obvious villain, but then they tried to reframe him as some misunderstood anti-hero, and they never properly addressed how he likely was a rapist. Because although we didn't see him do any of that firsthand in the TV series, he does try twice on 2 of the main characters. And I don't think they ever properly deal with that. I think he apologized, sort of, but I don't think that was enough. I've read a story where one of the main characters is a rapist, and I could still see at the end of his story how people could forgive him, because he really, really tried to do better. He made changes, he made sacrifice, he apologized. He basically did everything he could have reasonably done to make things right. And Chuck just didn't pull off that. He didn't put in the work, and then we were still supposed to forgive him. Yeah. But also, Gossip Girl is cruel. Like, really, really cruel. I'm going to try to find the sticky note I put to one of Gossip Girl's. Because that thing Chuck said, everything Serena's done while she's been away, there are a lot of rumors going around about her. Like that she was in a cult with chicken murderers. And yeah, Gossip Girl is cruel. And I think there's a good reason why she was never revealed in the books. And that's because she would get crucified for everything she's written. She is much crueler than in the series. And she's not good in the series. But here's something she wrote. The Virgin issue. Can you believe N? He was this close to getting a nice slice of bee pie, if you know what I mean. I guess we're supposed to admire his self-control, his ability to keep the old hot dog in the bun. But I bet B really wouldn't have minded too much if N had just kept his mouth shut and gotten on with it, instead of getting all moral up on her and telling her all about his time with S. I mean, who's B going to lose it to now? I was wrong about boys. I always thought they'd do anything to bag Virgin. I mean, I thought N would like the idea that B has never done it. But he doesn't seem to care about that at all. All it does is make having sex with her this huge thing that he can't deal with without smoking a big fatty and downing half a bottle of Jack Daniels. So disappointing. Not that he wasn't too quick to jump S's bone either. We all know she's no virgin. Maybe N just has high moral standards. Oh, that makes me like him even more. Your email. Hey, Gossip Girl. I saw S go upstairs with some dude at Tribeca Star. She was wasted. I was kind of tempted to knock on the door and see if there was a party going on, or S/T, but I chicken out. I just want your advice. Do you think she'd do me? I mean, she looks pretty easy. Chop. Dear Chop, if you're the type of guy who has to ask, then probably not. S may be a hoe, but she has excellent taste. Geeky. Sightings. Just one. Anne at a burrito place in Lexington, chatting up with the cute girl just behind the counter. She gave him extra guacamole for free. Yeah, I bet she did. You know you love me, Gossip Girl. I think in general, the book is much more brutal. Also, Blair has a certified eating disorder going on. She regularly throws up in the bathroom everything she eats. And, you know, I once read that this book was hated by parents in the United States because of all the vulgar language and how adult it was. And I thought, no, that's just American parents being overly protective of their children. And then I actually read it and I completely understand it, because even if counting down all the profanities, all the sex, there's still sexual assault, eating disorders, slut shaming, and yeah, there are a lot of problematic shit in this, but I also don't think that the author is trying to glorify the behavior. I think it's partly criticizing how they're living their lives and the privilege they take part in. Yeah, I have a couple of notes, but according to the timer, this is already 26 minutes long, and yeah, I think I've gotten to say the most important parts. Was it something I liked more? No, I think I got it all. So yes, this is Gossip Girl Book 1. I definitely think it's worth a read, because if you've only watched the show, you still wouldn't be bored, because it's different enough from the show that you won't feel like you already know everything. Yeah, go read this book. Your library probably has it, because it was hella popular. I know my library already has all the books. Bye!